public meeting.
By the authority invested me, I hereby declare this meeting of the Conshohocken Borough for a special meeting duly open and ready to conduct any business.
Tonight we are interviewing candidates for board and commission reappointments. The first individual in front of you is Nick Cerulli. Did I say that right?
Yes, correct.
Nice. And he is interviewing for the Dog Park Advisory Committee.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll start off with, why would you like to be on the dog park committee?
So I joined earlier in the summer as a replacement, and I've enjoyed my time so far and would like to continue to see how we can raise funds for the park and make the park better. I'm a current park member, so it'd be nice to be able to see some improvements.
Okay. Where do you live, Nick?
On Elm Street?
Okay, and obviously you have a dog?
Yes.
Okay. That's why you're interested in the dog park, makes sense. Oh, I took your question.
Nick, where do your strengths and weaknesses fit in with the committee?
Well, I think my strengths, I work in a management position in my current job, so I think I can bring some good leadership potential and just being able to present ideas well, because there's just a lot, that people want to talk about, so it's nice to be able to bring something to the table.
Where do you see improvements?
I think our main priority is definitely the grounds. It can get very muddy and messy at the dog park, so I know the main goal is to put in, there's like some artificial grounds that they would like to put in, and I definitely support that. So, but with that involves a lot of fundraising, so that's probably the biggest thing that could be improved.
You've spent time on the committee?
Yes, since this summer.
Yes. So in terms of the committee itself, is there anything you'd like to see the structure or the organization of the committee change or that you would alter? You said you're in a managerial position. Would you do anything differently?
I think the one thing that we were already going to change was having meetings be once a month. We were doing it every other month, and just with people's busy schedules, and especially during the summer, there was a lot of times where people can't come. So when it's every other month, it makes it difficult where if you were to miss a meeting and then it's like 3 to 4 months where you're not seeing everyone. So it works out better to be back on that once a month rate. So I know that's a change that we're making that I think is a good idea.
Do you have any good ideas for fundraising? Specifically for the dog park?
There's lots of bars and restaurants around here, so I know a few of them are welcome to do give back nights, and
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
So Nick, I got a question. You said you've been involved with the dog park
Yes.
committee, right?
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, children are not allowed in the dog park area, right?
Like young children?
Children, right.
Don't believe so, unless they're supervised, I think.
I don't think
Or
they're
not
in
at
the
all.
area at all, right, Mike?
You know what, I'm not sure.
I don't know what the regs are offhand.
think that's
I
what I'm
believe
trying
that
to
the rules and
clarify.
regulations prohibit children, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
But is there an age limit?
Yes, 21, I believe.
21.
I think it's 21. It's either 18 or 21.
So my question is, and listen, there's a lot of, I don't have a dog, but I grew up on a farm part-time.
Yeah.
Everybody has it, except a few people in this town don't have dogs. But I'm just curious because when I see a dog, I see a child. So what's your plans on, say you have a son or a child?
I don't have kids, but
Okay,
yeah.
well, if somebody has a child.
Yeah.
And their dog's in the dog park and they're busy talking with the other people, what's their children gonna do when they come bring their children? That's what I'm concerned about,
To the dog park?
to the dog park. If they're not allowed in the park, in the pen, I shouldn't call it the pen, but
Right, then
inside the facility where the dogs
Yeah.
are.
Well, I mean, if they're if they're not allowed to bring kids in, then they shouldn't be leaving their kids unattended, first of all.
I'm not saying they do, I'm
Okay.
just concerned about that, you know?
Yeah,
And the safety of the children too, you know?
yeah.
And the safety of the dog too, I mean, kids can really,
Yeah, I mean, both the kids and the dogs shouldn't be unattended
that's just a
at all.
question I have with this.
Okay.
Okay?
Maybe
Yeah,
it's
got it.
something that can be discussed at the meetings in an orientation process, maybe for people when they join.
Is that something, like, are they interested in letting kids be in the park?
No.
Is that something that's come up? Okay.
No,
Okay,
just so that they're not, but I think Bob's concern is if they're bringing them and keeping them outside. Maybe it's just something that the committee needs to discuss with people that, they need to be responsible. If they're bringing their dogs inside and their children outside, it could be a problem.
yeah, there is a
Right.
bylaws that I think are
Right.
being updated for January 1st, so
Okay.
I can reach out to Marissa and see if that's
Hey.
something that's included.
And honestly, we don't even know if it is a problem.
Or
Okay.
have an area where they can, the children can be when the dog, they have the dog.
Maybe that's the
Yeah,
discussion.
not-
Has it been an issue?
Okay.
That's the question.
Okay,
Any more questions? Thank you, Nick.
thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Our next interview is Jessica Roth for the Dog Park Advisory also. Hello, Jessica.
How are you guys?
Hi,
Good.
Jessica, good.
How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
So, why would you like to be on the Dog Park Commission?
Well,
Or are you on it already?
yeah,
Yes,
currently on the
okay.
committee. I've really enjoyed being on the committee, and we regularly are there, probably at least 3 times a week. And that's really the only way that our dog, gets exercise and gets to interact with other dogs. So I really like having a say in what goes on there.
Where do you live, Jessica?
Right on Elm Street, so it's super close to me, right behind Riverwalk, actually.
Right, good. You
Je-
say-
Jessica, in your time on the dog park, can you tell us a proud moment or something that you're very proud of that the dog park has done or that you've been part of?
Sure. I really liked, I know Fun Fest was a big thing. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go. We had prior commitments. But I know that went over really well with everyone. Wish we could have been involved. I know that we have been working to get a water feature installed. There's some things going on with like the Londonderry with that. And turf also, and of course, like just figuring out, because the dog park can get really muddy at times. So really just addressing the issues that are actually going on in the park.
So there's a lot of people using the park down there.
Yeah, there's a good amount. Like we usually go right after work, and that's probably whenever it's the busiest. And then there's probably 10 to 15 dogs there at a time. So
What do you see as one of the biggest challenges ahead for you in the committee?
at first, not familiar, honestly. Like you can probably tell, I'm very nervous. So just like getting involved and just like understanding what's going on and being a part of it. But that's one of the things that we wanted to do to get involved in the community. So took it as a challenge, not a didn't let us stop us. So.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Just, yeah. The third interview is Rick Barton for the Zoning Hearing Board.
We're just going to note for the record that Anita Barton has recused herself.
Good evening.
Good evening, Rick. Thank you for coming in again.
Good to be here.
First of all, for myself and council, we would like to thank you for your service all these years that you have already dedicated to the Zoning Hearing Board.
I
We do
appreciate that.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thanks a
you.
lot.
How many years is it?
I was thinking about that when I filed the application, and I think I came onto the zoning board in 2003. It's 2004, yes.
Okay.
So I was on planning commission before that. All right.
So, Rick, I know that you're also the chair.
Yes.
But as just a zoning officer, what do you see as your role for the borough in that capacity?
I believe the role of the zoning hearing board is to listen to applications by the residents for zoning relief, given their property situation, whether that be a variance or a special exception. And our job is to really hear the facts, to weigh them, to look at that situation in the light of the zoning ordinance, to take into account any neighbor concerns that may be relevant to the property, and also the concerns of Borough Council, and then make a decision. And normally we make a decision the same night with the aid of our solicitor, Michael Clark. Sometimes, if it's a more difficult decision, we take a month, which we're entitled to under the state planning code. So I think our job is to be as fair and open and to make good decisions when it comes to land use.
So Rick, there's a fine line between having enough information to make the right decisions or good decisions, or getting bogged down in the details
Right.
of other stuff. Council struggles with this. I'm sure lots of groups struggle with this.
Yeah.
In your experience, how do you decide what you need to know and what's left best in the hands of others?
I really listen carefully to the applicant and listen carefully to the reactions of the public. And, the code is important. It's what we have to deal with. But I'm really concerned about the use of the property going forward. And if I feel personally satisfied that the requested variance or special exception outweighs any possible inconvenience to neighbors, then I'm going to support it.
So, Rick, you've been on the board a long time, and you're seeing the borough growing,
Yes.
and a lot of people, a lot of residents, a lot of business people, new people are buying property in town, okay? And I know you never want to deny anybody use of their property, but we have some situations in town now that, they have absolutely no parking.
Right.
So where do you see us going with that? When we have people that own property and you don't want to deny them, and but we're in a situation right now where the parking's getting worse and worse by the hour of the day. So where do you see an improvement?
It's going to depend on the application in terms of the number of additional units, if we're talking about generation of parking.
Right.
And we also have to look at what we may have approved over the last few years for similar properties. I think we have to draw a line, and again, it's that balancing act. How many more units do you allow on a property, knowing full well that each of those units may have a couple of vehicles attached to it?
Right.
And maybe in some cases, you're going to have to really limit what you give. In other words, if they want 4 units, maybe you only give them 2. Parking is definitely a consideration.
How about a store, like a retail store?
Right.
That's tough.
That is more difficult, because when land is zoned commercial, I think you have to allow for reasonable use of that property for businesses, regardless of the amount of traffic. It makes it more difficult the larger the site, because that's the bigger the impact. But for most properties in Conshohocken, the sites are small and compact. And as you know, most of the businesses on Fayette Street, especially the lower portion of Fayette Street, have no on-site parking.
Right.
So the best I think we can do as a borough is to continue to develop more off-site parking within reasonable walking distance, so that the businesses can grow and people still have places to park their vehicles.
And there are some places, we made a few things that in the last
Yeah.
4 or 5 years or 8 years where there is places to put public parking, and we don't see it, until after the person moves in or
Yeah.
they're there, and, they already got their 5-year lease or whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Rick, I have a few questions.
Sure.
As you know, council is elected by the majority of the residents in each ward. And when you spoke about respecting the neighbors, How do you feel about respecting the majority of the residents' wishes in situations? Because, as we all know, there's that philosophy, not in my backyard, that looms its head in many areas. And how would you respond to that if the majority of the town is in favor of a variance or?
Of a variance.
Right, how would you feel about that?
Or how do you decide
Then-
that?
Right, how would you decide if you know the majority of the people want something?
And I guess I would want to know, Jane, just to, maybe this is a way of turning the question, how would the zoning board know if a majority wanted a particular variance? Because generally, what counts in a variance hearing is who shows up in that meeting that night. It's not petitions, it's not letters, it's who's physically present to voice support or opposition to an application. It's not like a vote. So if in the room that night we get significant opposition from many neighbors, but we don't hear from anyone else, I think we have to give a lot of weight to who's there physically. Variances are different from planning and land development decisions, because in that case, you as the elected officials are open to anybody that lives in the borough. But the zoning code, the planning code and the law gives weight to residents that will be immediately affected by variances, and that's why we have to listen to those that live nearby and give them sometimes more weight than you might want to with regard to the rest of the opinion of the town.
So then a vocal minority can make a decision, basically, rather than...
Well, they can't make a decision, but they can be very influential when it comes to the decision the zoning board makes, right? Because those are the properties within, say, 500 feet within that immediate area that will be most affected by any variance or special exception the zoning board might give.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this. When we know that there is a minority that is opposing something.
Right.
And we know from our residents that the majority of our residents would prefer something else happen. How can people don't really want to come forward because they do business in town and don't want to be on one side of the polarization that's happening.
Sure.
So you said you don't take petitions into consideration.
Well, petitions are another matter. I would say, Jane, that you as the council certainly have every right to bring evidence, to bring the borough solicitor to that meeting with the data that you've gathered and the evidence or petitions that you've gathered, and say, zoning board, when you consider this variance request, as you say, please be advised that, we know this to be the opinion of these many residents, if that's the evidence you have. And we'd be open to that. We have to be.
Right. So if I ask it another way, if something would be, an issue might be resolved to better the entire community rather than a minority, how would you be able to make that decision? That's something that overwhelmingly favors the community, but might be negative for a few people.
And then, again, it's a majority vote. We have 5 zoning board members. That's something we could certainly deliberate privately with the attorney. And yes, if there's a preponderance of evidence that the application merits the variance, we would support it.
And Rick, do you think as you are the chair?
Yes.
And I will need a little education on this. I don't know exactly what the role is of the chair. Can you explain
The
that
chair
to me a little
conducts
bit?
the meeting. And, as the chair, my responsibility is to see that people are heard in an orderly manner, that people that are trying to get too far off the topic, we politely say, hey, we need to focus on this question tonight. This isn't the planning commission. We're not considering A to Z.
Right.
We're here to talk about a very specific question related to this property. So myself, with the help of Michael Clark, we try to do that. Give people adequate time to speak without dominating the meeting. And then, of course, open it up to questions. And then we're going to ask questions as the zoning board to gather more information.
Right.
And then, if I feel a caucus is necessary, then I'll ask Michael Clark to request that, and we'll go into the conference room or out in the hall. And then we vote, and it's a roll call vote. Chris Stetler calls the roll. The chair always votes last, and that's how it works.
Okay. And do you have, is part of your role guiding your fellow zoning board in their procedures?
Certainly.
And their responsibilities?
I will ask questions of the other board members if I feel, perhaps their position might not have enough merit in my view, and I'll ask them that question. Okay. Sometimes we'll do that in caucus. That may not always be in public.
Right.
Right? But yes, I mean, I am concerned that, the members are doing their best to make a wise decision. That said, we don't have to be unanimous, and I don't expect that on every situation. We've had split votes.
We get it, yeah.
Yeah, not many.
No.
But sometimes we do, and I respect that, because
Right.
not each member sees this issue the same way, and that's why we have 5 votes, too, that
Right.
no one member dominates.
Anyone else?
So Rick, this year's certainly been a busy year for all of us, and we've had a lot of situations and different things where emotions have really been a driving force of what's going on in the borough. And I think it's just kind of normal for what it is that we're doing, because it involves people and things. How do you think we as leaders can remove that emotion and our personal differences and work together as a cohesive unit for the betterment of our community? Because right now, I'm not seeing that, so I'm looking for, how do you think that we can bridge what's going on? Because we are the leaders, we are the ones that will be responsible for moving us forward.
That's correct, yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you need to agree. You need to agree as a group on certain goals that are paramount, and whether that means good design in the project that's built, whether it means handling the traffic in a reasonable manner, limiting negative impacts like noise and lighting on the neighborhood. So I think if you as a group can agree that you have these priorities when it comes to land development, then it's a matter of weighing what comes before you. And you either do that publicly, normally you do that publicly, you ask questions, you try to get good information from anyone that comes to you. And then you may have to go into executive session from time to time. It's difficult, because some of you are going to be more sensitive on certain issues than others, but you have to identify some common ground and be able to state that to the public, that maybe there's 4 different issues in play here, but we think these 2 are the most important, and they have to take precedence.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So in what you just spoke of, I just want to ask one question.
Sure.
I know as a council, we are all very much aware when we do this process that our personal opinions have to be put aside. It doesn't matter what we feel or what we think. We have to do and decide what is best for the borough.
Yes.
And that is the mindset of the zoning board?
It is.
Okay.
It is, because that has to be set aside. You cannot make a good decision if you're emotionally driven. So, we receive the applications usually a few weeks before the hearing. We have time to read them over. Then as a group, we listen to the evidence, and, we question. And then if we need to go into caucus, I think that's another checkpoint where we say, okay, Are you giving this fair consideration? Have you heard the facts? Are there any questions? What does the law say? What does the zoning code say? And what is a wise decision here? And we're not perfect because we're human beings.
None of us
But
are, right.
that's what you have to work against, is the knee-jerk reactions. You just have to
Right.
look at it calmly, collectively, and make a wise decision.
Okay. Anyone else?
No.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
If Mr. Scharf could please come to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming in again.
Thank you.
So I see on you're 17 years, is that right?
98 puts me, I just did some math, and it's 20 years.
20 years.
Wow.
Well, thank you.
You at the more, huh?
Oh, wow.
It's been long. It's been a long ride, and I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of improvements in how the zoning hearing board has dealt with the ordinances and how the balance. Early years or my early years, there were suggestions I'd made, and one of them was to take a 3-person zoning hearing board, and I pushed very hard to make it a 5, and that makes a much better decision. Because you're allowed to have a 3-person, a 5-person. And I believe 5 was a much more fair number of hearing board members.
Gives you much more input.
Yes.
Yeah. Any questions?
What do you think is more important for the borough right now? Building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing and expanding or better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts?
I have an opinion, but my opinion is not dealt with in a zoning hearing board matter. Because we have ordinances to follow, we have criteria that we use to listen to the case and hearing and what is allowed. There's differences for special exceptions, differences for non-conforming uses,
Right.
and also for instance, the only one place that health, safety, and welfare is used is for special exceptions. So when people say it's health, safety, welfare, other ones you use, I guess not so much the benefit, but you look for no ill benefit.
Good answer.
So I'm going to ask the same question I asked Rick about denying people that have property, and you remember the question I asked Rick about when, like a lot of people, business people, and people that live in the town, own property in town, other property, and they're up for zoning for a new tenant, especially commercial space retail. And you know how our downtown is getting, overcrowded with, there's no parking. Anybody that's coming in for a new tenant, none of them have parking. I'm not saying none of them, but very little, okay? So what's your idea on creating different ways to get them parking for people and not denying people in the future?
Well, I believe when we've had issues of parking variances, they're usually very few times that we have situations where there's no parking available, and basically the hearing went forward for the applicant. And all the other times when we strive to make sure at least a majority of the parking is available for per the square footage or per the number of people of the use. But it is a tough situation because we have one district down where our business district is, that we have very much a problem with no parking for a restaurant or a business. And when you move further into the neighborhoods, it makes it even tougher. And if it's expected or accepted for businesses to go, move inward, and that's because of a non-conforming use that was already there. And this is where the council's decision would be to look at alternatives for the residents so they don't lose out on reasonable parking for their own, as in parking permits. One thing I've seen is a good early stretch of Springwell Avenue doesn't seem to have parking permits to help that first block or two if it's further down. Looking at, and I do applaud the use or changes, back when Mr. Sotaro was on council, a suggestion I had made at a meeting, I'm not sure if it was ever picked up that I made it, but I researched Westchester, the community of Westchester used back-in angled parking, and this was, I'd say, probably the early 2000s. And it was mentioned at our meetings in talking and also in a council meeting. And I'm not sure if it was several years afterwards, but it became a pattern or use that council put into many streets. So we have to look at creative uses, but at the same time, look around to other boroughs and townships to see how they've met the challenges, because parking is tough.
Thank you.
Okay, and I will ask you the same question I asked Rick, that council is elected by all of the residents in our wards, and as Rick mentioned, you are more sensitive just to the people that show up at meetings. So to me, that's the minority of people. Most people don't come to the zoning meetings, even though they express their opinions very freely when you bump into them at the supermarket or the fellowship house. So how do you feel about weighing issues when it's, again, a vocal minority against something and the majority of the residents are in favor of it? Like, what would be some of the factors you would weigh?
Well, when there's the audience or the members who are present at the hearing, we do listen to their opinions and their comments at the end, but their questions are the most important portion. We don't just look at the sheer numbers of people who are for or against an application. One thing is do they come forward and actually either show pictures or show that, geez, this block is usually parked heavily when the applicant has already said, no, it's wide open, it's empty. So we are fact-based.
So
We can't listen to the residents, or I'm not certain that, you said the vocal majority, minority.
Minority.
That's what, we cannot factor in the opinions or use any of what we hear to make a decision. We have to look at a use. Is it a detriment and not a detriment? Is it a benefit, a huge benefit, say in the case of older structures, old homes that are sitting in disrepair, and it becomes a safer situation compared to what was there and still being utilized. Some non-conforming uses, for instance, back in the boroughs, small garage businesses, stuff like that.
Right.
When you say you have to weigh out if it's a benefit, is that a subjective idea? Is a benefit to you? Like, how does the zoning board determine benefit versus contraindicated?
I know I use, is it an ill benefit? Because I only rule, is it an ill benefit because it's a equal or lesser use? And in the case of an equal or lesser use, if a business is bringing in a lot different either patron or resident, that tends to, it would show that the use has a negative on residents surrounding it. So I don't usually, saying the word benefit, I usually use the opposite of that. An ill benefit yields what the benefit will be, and that is to not be no benefit.
If there's one thing in our zoning code that you would want to see changed since you've been doing this for 20 years, what would you say that would be?
I have a couple, but I'll try to keep it to one. Years ago, and it's probably not as possible now because we were pretty built out, we were looking at side yard setbacks, and we used to have a 7-foot and 5-foot side yard setback that would allow either a 10-foot or a 12-foot distance between homes. Something I had tried to, I guess, push towards council, it didn't get met well, was if you look at the height of a building, a house that can go in now is 35 feet, either to the median or to the roof peak. Well, for you to maintain your house and put a ladder up 35 feet, the safe distance, the ladder for the proper angle below is 9 feet. We have chosen by zoning ordinance to keep people almost from not maintaining their own properties. And I think it's a shame we really can't go much more than the 5 foot. We actually reduced to 5 foot. And I find that helps only, I think, homes and developers fit more on the property. So I guess my one comment is I would like to see a difference in how we view side yard setbacks, although I'm not sure. I think the barn door's been open on that.
So you started out by saying, I have a few ideas. I've been doing this now for 3 years, and I guess this kind of goes out to you as well, Rick. If you guys aren't talking to us as council on your challenges, and I'm going back to where do we as leaders of the community need to start working together, this is one of those areas. I am inviting you to please reach out to us. You have a working council here that wants to work on the things to make your roles easier. You know, the idea of all these variances, there's obviously things we need to look at and change as we move forward. But in the 3 years that I've sat in this seat, I have not had one zoning person come to me and say, hey, could we take this on as a project? So if you wouldn't mind taking that back to your group, I think we all would appreciate that, to be able to help you do your job and to do it well, because the end result is our community benefits from it.
Yes.
So,
And it helps us do our job better, because if you don't tell us, we don't know.
so thank you. And we'll talk about those other few.
Okay, thank you.
So just in essence of time,
Yep.
we're going to move forward,
Yes.
so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to eliminate the break, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Brian Tobin was unable, sorry, Bob. Brian Tobin was unable to make it tonight. He's coming on the 19th. So next up is Carol, and then we'll get to Matt. So but we have to be mindful of time. So
Okay.
Carol, come to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, Carol. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everybody.
So, Carol, why would you like to be on the Sewer Authority again?
Why would I like to continue on the sewer
Again,
authority?
yes. Yes.
Well, probably it's one of the favorite things I do. People always get a laugh out of that when I say I'm on the sewer board. But historically, why I got involved with the sewer authority was I wanted to do something in my community. And at the time, I reached out to my ward council, and there was an opening. And they were actually interested in having somebody who is a scientist on the board. And I am a scientist. I have a master's degree in chemistry from Lehigh, hard won. And I also love Conshohocken. I've been here most of my adult life. I moved here when I was young to work at GSK. It was a different community then. I loved it then. I bought my house where I did because it was right near the bike trail. I'm an avid biker. So I do bike along both sewer plants, so I'm well aware of that. And I like having a part in the stewardship of our community asset. Because that's what it is. It's our community asset.
What do you see as one of the biggest challenges facing the authority right now?
Well, moving forward to maintain what we are, moving forward, keep maintaining our base business as well as our 20-year plan in terms of maintenance of the authority, being responsive to our community. In terms of anything that we have as a challenge, I have to say I think our biggest challenges we've tackled and done a good job with. We have a good infrastructure plan in place. We have a good 10, 20-year plan in place. We're maintaining our facility, our infrastructure, meaning the sewer lines throughout our community. We have most of the map. We have a map of those. We know exactly what needs to be repaired in the state of the sewer lines. So I think moving forward, our biggest challenge is to keep maintaining efficiencies, and we constantly try to do that in terms of our maintenance budget, and just being a responsible part of the community. And I think we've done that with our odor control plan. The history of sewer authorities, as they were built in an industrial belt along the river. Those areas have since been gentrified, and that area, there's some very high-end housing down there. So we were very responsive to the community and well within our budget. We came through with that and really tackled a problem with I'm quite proud of what we did with our odor control project.
It was great.
Right, it's a big improvement, definitely. Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you, there's little or no odor. Well, I live up on the west side, but I hear less people complaining about this, and I don't smell it anymore. I don't know what you're doing down there, but whatever you're doing, it's working.
Captain.
Well, we contained the whole press
Yeah, you
plant, so.
yeah.
Right, they encapsulated it all.
Encapsulated everything.
Yes.
Which was supposed to be done 20 years ago. We had promises from other people.
Well, we have a good team. We got the best consultant in the country that does that sort of work, Webster out of Kentucky, and we worked with them. There were some kerfluffles within that, but we managed all that throughout that, and it's been a successful implementation of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bridenstine?
Good evening.
Good evening, Matt.
Good evening.
So, Matt, where would you like to continue?
I don't know if you could tell I'm pretty passionate about the subject. I believe that in human history we're at a pretty critical moment right now, and I feel like this is my way to address some of the environmental issues that are facing not just our community but our nation and across the world. There's a number of projects that we've initiated this past year. We've gotten a lot of momentum, but we're just not quite there with its fruition. And I feel like I've made promises to this borough, and I've made promises to you, and I've made promises to our community, and I want to see these things get done. So I hope that if you were to appoint me again, then I can help make that happen.
So Matt, you updated us earlier in the year with two very specific goals, community engagement and community education. Can you take us through some of the work you've done on those two fronts?
Yeah, definitely. So that's been a focus of ours. And so what we've done is we created a Friends of the EAC, and through having community volunteers participate in what we're doing has allowed us to do more, and it's allowed us to educate the public. I think right now we have 35 or 37 people on our Friends of the EAC. And a lot of them have presented in front of you. For example, they're ready for 100. We have Friends of the EAC who are building or are coming together to form a shade tree team. So again, that's one project that I really am passionate. I want to see that get done. And workshops, the EAC team has done a fabulous job, and it's not because of me, it's because of them. They're the ones that are really spearheading the workshops that we've been doing. We've done workshops on rain barrels and rain gardens. Tonight we have a screening of a movie at the library. We've done workshops for kids for environmental education. So it's been a really good year in those two things. So.
Thank you.
How many rain barrels have you actually put out now?
I believe
you know?
6 or 7.
6 or 7?
6 or 7. You will find one at the library.
Yes, we installed it.
Yes, yeah, that's right. You're
It was
there.
fun.
But our goal this year is to increase that by a lot. Not just with businesses, but residential too. So we're getting there. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
And thanks for all your hard work.
We take a break because we could be here 2 more.
Do you need a break, a quick
Yeah.
break, and then we'll start? Okay, we'll take a 2-minute break, and then we will start the public meeting.